This is a symbolic, psychological, and hermetic exploration. Nothing here should be taken literally. What you are about to hear is metaphor, myth, depth, psychology, and esoteric philosophy. A map of the inner world, a mirror, a threshold, a portal. Now breathe. Because there is a threshold that opens only when someone dares to look inward. There is a portal that does not appear in ancient forests, nor in forgotten ruins, nor in stone circles under the moon. This portal is closer, much closer. It lives in the shadow you carry, in the memory you avoid, in the wound you pretend is healed, in the voice that whispers when the world finally becomes silent. What happens when you stop running from that voice? What emerges when you finally turn toward the darkness inside you? This is the shadow portal, the threshold between who you are and who you fear you might become. And today, we cross it. Every ancient myth speaks of portals, doors between worlds, cracks in reality, secret passages where the living touch the dead, where the human touches the divine, where the conscious touches the unconscious. But what the myths do not say, at least not directly, is that these portals were never physical places. They were always metaphors, always internal maps, always symbols of the psyche. So what is a portal truly? It is the boundary between what you know and what you fear to know. Carl Jung called it the threshold of the shadow. Eliade called it the inner axis mundi. The Hermeticists called it the middle gate. The witches called it the night path. And all of them were speaking of the same thing, a point of transition, a place where consciousness dissolves and reforms, a space where the human encounters the other, not the other as enemy, but the other as intelligence, as presence, as force, as Daimon. The portal is the place where you stop being only yourself and begin to be more. Witchcraft, the real archetypal symbolic witchcraft, was never about literal spells or external manipulation. Witchcraft has always been a technology of consciousness, a set of practices that alter the internal state, break the rigidity of the ego, dissolve the boundary between conscious and unconscious, and open the portal. The magic circle is not a physical space. It is a psychological one. It is the moment you tell your unconscious, speak. The candle is not just fire. It is the symbol of attention, of presence, of the inner flame illuminating what was hidden. The night is not just darkness. It is the symbolic womb where transformation happens. The veil between worlds is not outside. It is inside. The witch, the archetype, is the one who crosses thresholds, who enters and exits the portal, who walks between worlds, who speaks with intelligences that are not human because they are older than the human. But what are these non-human intelligences truly? Are they spirits, entities, beings from beyond? Or are they something far closer, far more intimate, far more unsettling? When we speak of non-human intelligence, many imagine external beings, supernatural presences, invisible forces living in forests, cemeteries, or parallel dimensions. But the Hermetic truth is different. Non-human intelligences are archetypal structures of the psyche, patterns of consciousness that did not begin with you, forces that precede you, presences inside you that are not you, yet live within you. The Greeks called them Daimons, the Romans called them genius, the Hermeticists called them intermediate intelligences, the Gnostics called them archons, Renaissance magicians called them planetary spirits. Depth psychologists call them autonomous complexes. And all of them describe the same thing, parts of the psyche that have a life of their own. These intelligences are not human because they do not follow human logic. They have no morality, no ego, no narrative, no fear. They are forces, patterns, voices that speak the language of symbol, dream, intuition, and shadow. And the portal is the place where these voices become audible. The shadow portal is not a location. It is a moment. The instant your consciousness touches the limit of what it can tolerate. The point where your internal narrative begins to dissolve. The encounter with what you repressed, denied, hid, feared. The portal opens when you have a dream that haunts you, a memory you refuse to revisit, an impulse you cannot explain, an emotion that overwhelms you, an intuition that frightens you, a truth you refuse to admit. The portal is the boundary between the self and the not-self, between what you control and what controls you. And when you cross it, you do not find monsters. You find mirrors. Mirrors that show you parts of yourself you did not want to see. Mirrors that reveal your strength and your fragility. Mirrors that force you to confront your own depth. The portal is the beginning of individuation, and witchcraft has always understood this. Witchcraft knew the portal was not physical. It was psychological, symbolic, internal. That is why rituals are living metaphors. They are ways of communicating with the unconscious. Languages that speak directly to the non-human intelligences within you. When a witch draws a circle, she is delimiting the space of consciousness. When she lights a candle, she is illuminating the shadow. When she invokes a name, she is activating an archetype. When she enters trance, she is crossing the portal. And when she crosses the portal, she meets the other. The other is not a literal demon, not an external spirit, not a being living outside you. The other is the part of you that you do not recognize. Your shadow, your Daimon, your repressed strength, your hidden truth, your original wound. And when the portal opens, that part speaks. It speaks through symbols, dreams, impulses, intuitions, synchronicities. The other is the non-human intelligence living inside you, and witchcraft is the art of conversing with it. But why is the portal dangerous? Not because it contains monsters, but because it contains truths. Truths about who you are, what you desire, what you fear, what you hide, what you refuse to admit. The portal is dangerous because it forces you to confront yourself, and most people flee from themselves. That is why the portal is guarded by the shadow. The shadow is the guardian, the filter, the test. Only those willing to see may cross. Crossing the portal is not an act. It is a process. First resistance, then fear, then dissolution, then encounter, then integration, then return. This is the alchemical cycle, the witch's cycle, the individuation cycle, the hero cycle, the mythic cycle. The portal is the beginning of the journey. The shadow is the guide. The other is the teacher. And you are the apprentice. Jung, Eliade, rites and symbols of initiation. Campbell, the hero with 1,000 faces. Hillman, the dream and the underworld. Evola, the Hermetic tradition. Agrippa, 3 books of occult philosophy. Plotinus, Enneads, the corpus Hermeticum, the Emerald Tablet. Fraser, the Golden Bough. Neumann, the origins and history of consciousness. But what truly happens when the portal opens? What unfolds in that silent interior where the human dissolves, and something older begins to speak. The first thing that emerges is not revelation. It is disorientation. The ego, accustomed to being the center of the narrative, suddenly realizes it is not alone. It realizes it is not the author of the story, but merely one voice among many. And this realization feels like falling inward, falling into a depth that has no bottom, falling into a darkness that is not empty, but full of symbols, memories, impulses, forgotten selves, and presences that watch from behind the veil of consciousness. This is why so many traditions describe the portal as a descent, a catabasis, a journey into the underworld. But the underworld is not a place beneath the earth. It is the layer of the psyche beneath the surface of awareness. And the beings encountered there are not literal spirits. They are the autonomous intelligences that shape your desires, fears, instincts, and dreams. So what does it mean to meet them? What does it mean to stand before a presence that is not human, yet lives inside you? It means confronting the parts of yourself that you have exiled. The anger you never expressed, the grief you never mourned, the desire you never admitted, the potential you never claimed, the truth you never spoke. These exiled parts do not disappear. They become daimons. They become non-human intelligences because they no longer speak the language of your conscious mind. They speak in symbols. They speak in impulses. They speak in dreams. They speak in synchronicities that feel like messages from another world. And in a sense, they are. The shadow portal is the moment when these messages become impossible to ignore. When the unconscious stops whispering and begins to roar. And this is where witchcraft becomes essential. Not as superstition, but as a symbolic technology for navigating the encounter. Witchcraft provides a language for the other, a structure, a ritual container, a way of approaching the non-human intelligence without being overwhelmed by it. What happens if you face the shadow without a circle, without a flame, without a symbol to anchor you? You dissolve. You fragment. You lose the thread of your own story. The ego collapses under the weight of the unconscious. This is why the ancients insisted on ritual. Ritual is not about controlling spirits. It is about controlling the psyche. So the witch draws the circle, not to keep demons out, but to keep the ego intact. She lights the candle, not to summon spirits, but to illuminate the inner darkness. She speaks the name, not to command an entity, but to give form to the formless. She enters trance, not to escape reality, but to enter a deeper layer of it. And in that altered state, the portal opens. The threshold dissolves. The other emerges. But what does the other want? What does the non-human intelligence seek when it steps through the portal of your consciousness? It seeks integration. It seeks recognition. It seeks to return to the whole. The shadow is not your enemy. It is your unfinished self. The diamond is not a demon. It is your unlived life. The non-human intelligence is not an invader. It is the part of you that has been waiting for permission to exist. And yet, the encounter is terrifying. Because the other does not speak politely. It does not negotiate. It does not flatter your ego. It confronts you with the truth of your desires. The truth of your wounds, the truth of your potential, the truth of your contradictions. And truth is always disruptive. Truth is always dangerous. Truth is always a portal. So what happens when you listen? What happens when you stop resisting and allow the other to speak? You begin to transform. You begin to shed the false self, the persona you built to survive, to be accepted, to be loved. You begin to see the stories you inherited, the beliefs you never questioned, the fears that shaped your identity, and you begin to realize that the self you thought you were was only a mask. The shadow portal is the moment the mask cracks, the moment the persona fractures, the moment the unconscious steps forward and says, "This is who you are beneath the story." And this revelation is both terrifying and liberating. Terrifying because it destroys the illusion of control. Liberating because it reveals the possibility of authenticity. But authenticity is not comfortable. Authenticity requires sacrifice. What must be sacrificed? The false self, the ego's illusions, the narratives that no longer serve you, the identities you outgrew, the roles you were forced to play, the wounds you used as shields, the fears you used as excuses. The portal demands an offering, and the offering is always the same, the version of you that cannot cross. This is why the portal is guarded. This is why the shadow stands at the threshold. Not to punish you, but to protect the transformation. Only the self that is willing to die can be reborn. Only the self that is willing to dissolve can be reformed. Only the self that is willing to face the other can become whole. So what lies beyond the portal? What emerges after the dissolution, after the encounter, after the sacrifice? A new configuration of the psyche, a deeper integration, a more expansive consciousness, a self that is no longer fragmented, no longer divided, no longer at war with itself. A self that can hold contradiction, a self that can contain darkness without being consumed by it. A self that can speak with the non-human intelligence without losing its own voice. This is the alchemical marriage, the union of opposites, the reconciliation of the conscious and the unconscious, the integration of the shadow, the awakening of the daimon, the emergence of the true self. And this is why the portal is sacred. This is why the witches guarded it. This is why the Hermeticists encoded it. They knew the diamond was the guide. They knew the ritual was the map. They knew the night was the womb. They knew the flame was the soul. They knew the threshold was the self. Jung, Eliade, Campbell, Hillman, Evola, Agrippa, Plotinus, the Hermetic corpus, the Emerald Tablet, Fraser, Neumann, all of them, in their own language, described the same journey.